Welcome everyone of the last webinar of today. And in this webinar, Anne-Claire Fuchs and Jan Bebermeijer from Eppendorf will tell you all about the future of the digital lab. You see them right on the screen, and as usual, you can ask all your questions in the chat box on the right-hand side. So then, well, good luck.
Okay, thank you everyone, and also thanks to our audience for tuning in today for our live webinar. Me and Jan, we would like to talk about the digital lab future, or is it today? And first of all, we would like to have a quick look at the agenda. So today we would like to actually talk about the question, why digitalize? What are the benefits? Why is it worth it to look into that? And also about talking about the challenges in the laboratory. And last but not least is also the path of switching to a digital lab. And here I would like to jump right into the question, why digitalize? Well, digitalization in general, I think it is a term that describes a vast field. I think everyone nowadays has the one and only thing for digitalization in our private lives, which is our smartphone. It is acting like a kind of control panel. You can do your banking, you stay in touch with your friends and family, you can write emails, you can give phone calls, you can even see each other, you can do FaceTime. And this is one of the nice benefits of digitalization in our private lives. And it doesn't really end there. It doesn't end with reading a newspaper online. It doesn't end with the electronic injection in the car engine, for example. So there's so much more power behind digitalization that we can also think about what kind of benefits this brings to us in the laboratory environment, for example. So the question we also would like to discuss here today in this webinar is what kind of benefits digitalization brings us in the routine tasks, for example, in the laboratory, managing the laboratory, enhancing the research in a much better way. And one of the things we often point out is actually when thinking about how is my lab doing. So the questions we are thinking about is, how is my lab equipped? Where do I store the data? Is it digital? Is it analog in kind of paper form? Managing the lab equipment in a way has to be documented. You're also interested in knowing what's going on with your samples. Where are your samples, for example, stored? How do you prepare for an audit? There are lots of different data you are using for that. Some are saved in a digital format. Some are maybe still written in paper. Your protocols, for example, you're still using a general lab notebook. And also, where are your samples located? And all those things. This is also the question, why not digitalize it so that you have everything available at your fingertips? You don't need to search for the data or the documents at different locations, be it in a folder printed out, or be it in a lab notebook, or be it in a cloud storage on the internet. But thinking about that one aspect further, when we are talking about the samples, we can also think about sample management, how you could embrace sample management in a way with digital solutions to have everything like a better overview of where your samples are stored, where your samples have been used in certain experiments, what happened with the sample, the donor information, for example, when it comes to certain sample types. Sample identification can be embraced with digitalization, but also the documentation around that. And this is one thing why the question, why digitalize, makes a lot of sense to raise it and think about what kind of solution can support you to overcome certain challenges. And when thinking about the challenges, we at Eppendorf identified with customers together these mountains to climb. I think especially in that COVID-19 situation, we are forced to work from home. We are forced to work in a different way. there are greater things we need to think about, also in terms of what we would like to achieve in the laboratory. Nowadays, there's a greater need in terms of service. We have a lot of different devices in the laboratory, from simple centrifuges, pipettes, but also to analytical instruments. They need to be serviced. So how to plan that also, for example, when you're not always in the laboratory and you need to remotely somehow change everything. And also in terms of the need for greater efficiency nowadays, this is a rising need. And thinking about now the testing situation, that the sample density is increasing here, and also how to manage that, also with a larger data set. I think this is one thing we also see right now during the COVID-19 situation, that there are more data sets we need to manage and how to take care of that. So these are mountains to climb, but also thinking about data security and data integrity. I would like to trace back where this data comes from, where I'm saving the data. Such things can be also answered with solutions which are set up in a digital way, which also support the need for a more agile workforce. I think we heard from many customers during that time that they had to reinvent their working style, also splitting the lab groups, for example, working more in shifts. That group one is, for example, always from a morning to lunchtime in the lab, and then group two, for example, is starting to work in the lab in the afternoon. So there are new ways of working which have to be introduced, and this leads also to greater need for traceability, but also documentation. So who's taking care of things, what has to be done in the lab, and some pillars we also have to identify. We have identified are actually the goals in the lab, also from a perspective of a lab manager or from a perspective of a quality manager in the lab, reducing the risk in the laboratory, managing the costs. I think budgeting is always, especially to an end year's business or for the new year planning things, always a field we have to discuss, and also saving time. Who doesn't want to have more freedom, taking care of your research, and be more settled when it comes to your lab management? And with that saying, I will hand over to Jan, who will talk about the challenges in the laboratory.
Yeah, thanks. So now what we learned is, okay, there are a lot of things where we can, benefit from digitalization in the lab. But let's face it, what are really the challenges? What's in for me as a scientist? So I think every one of us is aware of issues and challenges, but let's have a look in the details. I mean, quite obviously, samples are the core of all our work in the lab. And I think all of you are familiar, hopefully not with your own equipment, but on the neighbors group, with a freezer which looks like that one here on the picture on the left side of the slide. So you open it, it's pure chaos, it's full of snow and ice, and you just close it and think, oh gosh, that's not mine. I don't want to look at it again. So on the other side, okay, there are lists, there are perhaps Excel lists, but also paper-based lists where people just document where they put their sample, hopefully. But it would be more obvious to have properly labeled tubes in boxes, in racks, in a sorted freezer range, and that's it. But that's not live, but it could be. Then on the other side, I mean, if you're a scientist, all of us are used to these paper-based notebooks where you have documented every step in the lab, every protocol, every workflow you performed, also the results from different products. So different instruments where you get data from, you have to copy paste them because it's just a printout, or perhaps you have a data format which is not compatible. So paper is still king. Sometimes you can expand it by Excel, but still, as you can see on that poor guy on the bottom line, it's not really the best. So there is room for improvement. The same is actually for all your instruments. That means the asset management. I mean, if something is broken, you need to sort out, okay, which company, what's the name of the guy who's fixing this unit? Is there a phone number? Is he or she available? Then this person comes, filling out form sheets, you have to sign, then you get a pile of paper stuff, and you have to put it somewhere. again, your range of paper is growing in the lab, in your office, and that is, well, we're all used to it, but no one really loves it. So when we summarize it, it's really something, as Anne-Claire just pointed out, there are ways to, well, to have short-term decisions. That means reducing your costs, being more efficient. That means taking care about your samples, because that's where your scientific or your business success relies on. I mean, if your samples are gone, destroyed, lost, whatever, you're in trouble. And then for sure that you know where your samples are located, not only in the freezer, but also in any other kind of stock. I mean, if it's a ULT freezer or a liquid nitrogen stock, or just somewhere in the lab, because the samples are stored at room temperature, the better you know, the more where they are, the more time you can save. I mean, if you're used to lab work, you all know these protocols. That means you have a long list of to-do steps, which means, for example, like here in this example, but that's just by chance, an RNA prep. You start with some cells, you do your extraction, you clean it up, you measure the amount of nucleic acid, and then you store it somewhere. And that means on the bottom line, you see a lot of red boxes, and that's all documentation. To be honest, I mean, yeah, you should fulfill all these red boxes. I know that in reality, sometimes you have less than should be. I mean, latest a year later on, you will realize, oh, damn it, I forgot something to document. But then it's too late. And I mean, I had the same experience on my own time in the lab. At the very moment of the experiment, you think, okay, I've wrote down everything's fine, everything is safe. And then when you summarize your results a year or 2 years later, you think, oh, gosh, what exactly did I do there? So all these things are, in theory, okay for us. We're aware of these needs, but as they are all separate manual steps, that's something, there's a high risk that you forget something. But there's also another truth. That means most of these steps can be done on a digital way already. That means instead of using the paper-based notebook, you can use an electronic notebook. You can scan in your samples because the samples have barcodes with digital information about the source. The document could be online in a digital notebook. The location of your samples, all that, the results of measurements, so lot numbers of kits or serial numbers of units which you're using, that all can be already documented in software. It's just a question of how far are you on this journey towards digitalization in the lab. So what kind of path could we address to switching our, let's say, analog lab to more or less digital lab, at least to start it? So we selected 3 columns, so we say, okay, that is something where we can start on, and also you can start on, which is on the one side, the inventory management. That means clear identification of your sample, and you know where they are. The second column is, okay, document whatever you're doing in the lab. So your results and your protocols, your workflows in a better way. And also to monitor your equipment and to check the, let's say, the service and maintenance levels on a digital pattern. So instrument management. So in a classic workflow in the lab, it starts like you have tubes, all different kind of tubes, because everyone is using different type of vessels in the lab. But identification is king. That means, do you have a proper label, at least a printed one? It would be nice to have a barcode because that is super safe. But the minimum should be a printed label, because I think every one of you already suffered with tubes in the fridge or freezer, where you're thinking, what is on this label? That's handwritten. I have no clue. Not even the owner is clear of this tube. So there's a clear tendency towards proper and clean labeling. Assuming you have a barcode, you can scan it. The system can just transfer this data in the related database. And then you may get further information from this tube. That means the lot number, ordering numbers, supplier information, things like this. And then finally, you may up with your sample journey in a database where you have all information which are related to the sample, related to the process, related to the material you are using on one page, on one chapter of this database. So that means for tracing your samples and identification of your samples, okay, you do have inventory systems. So if you're lucky, you already have an Excel list or an Access system. So there are already some systems, but you could already do the next step. That means you have a dedicated database which is just optimized for sample inventory. Because then you really have a tracing function most of the time. That means you can really check who got which samples out of the system at which time point. You can find free slots. So, I mean, everyone is crying for a new freezer because the old one or ones are just crowded. You don't have enough space. But there are enough studies that many freezers are not really used in an efficient way. That means a significant part of the freezer is still empty. You just believe it's full because it's just crowded and packed, and there's no systematic approach. So that means you can save space in your freezer by having a dedicated, organized, and structured inventory. If you're working in a regulated environment, it's necessary to have a documentation which is, for example, 24 CFR Part 11 compatible, GXP or whatever you can name it. There are different ways where you have to do this anyway. And for sure, you could also manage reagents. When do I need to reorder things? Because they are out of stock in the freezer. So you can monitor, you do not need to dig in the freezer. Okay, the reagent XYZ is empty. Oh, damn it, I wouldn't need it now. It's empty. But really check online in the system. Okay, we still have 1, 2, or 10 tubes of this reagent left. Another step is really in the lab, at the bench. Okay, what kind of work streams are you fulfilling? So again, leaving the paper-based stuff and using an online tool or digital tool to document everything. And again, there are things like where you have to follow SOPs, where you have to follow documentation conditions to fulfill the needs in your department or your institution. So if you're working in pharma, you have to document everything. And this tendency is going on and on also in academia, starting there as well.
Okay. When it comes to instrument management, I think a huge advantage of digitalization can be connecting instruments to solutions like a platform, for example, where you can monitor your instruments. I think maybe some of you already have your lab connected to a BMS solution. So if there's an alarm occurring, you're getting notified. You may be getting even a call from a guard. But it's not really efficient in a way that you can do troubleshooting. So there's not a clear message brought to you with letting you know what happened before the alarm occurred maybe, or if like a user intervention for a certain shaker run, for example, is needed. So like platforms similar to what we offer with Eppendorf and with Visionize maybe can help you to have a better understanding of what happens to your device during an alarm or before. So you're getting maybe notified for alarms, errors, warnings, but also user interventions via email and text messages. Really convenient if you're right now not in the lab, you're working maybe right now in the office and letting your shaker run, etc. It's also a nice tool to ensure full sample safety, sample integrity when it comes to storing your samples in your freezers. Sometimes some things happen and you don't want to harm your samples due to a stupid power outage. So this is something which supports you, giving you more peace of mind. Checking also from remote your instrument performance is really convenient from any location where you have access to data or parameters like temperature, having also the chance to check like an event list to see what kind of user interventions happened during my absence. This is really a benefit for you as the lab user, and you are benefiting from an enhanced insight into equipment health and sample safety, so to say. So this is one way where digitalization can enhance us. The other way is also thinking about when you're interested or you're needing a new lab device, thinking about what kind of equipment might be the right choice for me. We at Eppendorf, our newest device generation is following a holistic UI and UX concept, meaning some of the devices of our portfolio are equipped with the touch interface, and they are similar set up in a way that if you know one device, you're usually also capable of easily navigating through the menu of the other devices. This is meant by UI and UX concept. So this is also one aspect which is maybe supporting you in the lab for the reduced need of trainings. If there's a new device then purchased, there's less training need for certain lab users needed. Another thing is also the data capturing. How can we capture data out of the instruments, which you maybe need for preparing an audit, like certain device logs of your instruments, so that you can prove that they were running the way you set them. And this shows that the parameters were set up the right way. The temperature for the samples is in the condition you want to keep them. So this is one aspect which is considered how to capture the data out of an instrument. Certain parameters can be captured in a different way using like temperature sensors, as you see in the right corner and the left corner here. There are also sensors measuring the gas condition of a CO2 incubator, for example, but also agitation or light intensity when it comes to a shaker. So such sensors are also providing us data which can be maybe transferred into a platform where you have remote access to it. And really in general, what kind of device data I get out of my instrument is really one aspect which is interesting to look into when you're thinking about purchasing a new device for your lab. Another thing is, as we are also talking about preparing for audits, you want to have access to data, right? You want to have a safe place for storing and exporting, also the ability of exporting data of an instrument. Having also a look or the ability to have a look into the maintenance history of an instrument. I mean, quite common is to maintain an Excel sheet where you have listed on in the one column the different instruments, your assets in your lab, and then also tracking the different intervals for service or maintenance when it comes to pipette calibration, for example. Such things can be much more conveniently done in a tool, which is also reminding you of there is a service due, you need to send your pipettes to calibration, but also feeding back when they are back from calibration that maybe something happened during calibration, or planning also the next interval. So having precise protocols is really the need in the laboratory to have such protocols available at your fingertips. And it also plays back into the overall goals in the lab: reduce risk, reduce costs, and saving time, right? If you have to collect all the information on your own, it's quite cumbersome. Another thing is also, as I said, keeping assets maintained, especially when it comes to pipettes. Here, pipettes only should be used when they are calibrated and you can ensure that they are working the right way, they are giving the right volume out. And here it's really important to track the maintenance status. And also for other instruments like shakers, incubators, etc., it's really needed to keep that. One thing which also digitalization is enhancing is, for example, the concept of remote updates. You don't have to be anymore there present, organizing with the service technician of the manufacturer, for example, that your devices are getting into service. How easy would it be if you can maybe, before you leave the lab at night, you switch on the device and request the remote update, and when you're back in the lab in the morning the next day, the update is done and you can start using the lab instrument the way it was before. Maybe bug fixes can be done with that. You have maybe access also to new features when it's in a lab instrument which is capable of doing so. This is really delivering us more convenience and plays again back to those three goals we set: risk, costs, and time saving. When it comes to the real future, of course, it's nice to have a connected lab with instruments where you can status check, see what happened when an alarm occurs. But the real future is also working with the data, drive productivity, convenience, and reproducibility through the entire laboratory workflow, really from designing your experiments, your protocols. It's often common, and when I'm talking to customers, is that the first thing they are doing before starting with a pipette, they think about what I want to do, how do I have to prepare the assays, what is the protocol, what kind of equipment I also need for that, and they start to design their protocols, and then they are going into the execution. And how nice it would be if you can plan your entire workflow, design it based on the different steps you want to do, and then choose later on the instruments you really would like to utilize in that experiment, and later on also go the next step by optimizing it based on the outcome. So this is actually the future lab we are working on within Eppendorf. This is the vision we could imagine workflows can be managed in the future. So it's really, the foundation is getting a lab connected, working with the data, then is the next step. As you have learned now or got to know what kind of things you could consider for making the switch in your lab, for getting, digital, what is actually also important to consider, I think, especially check out the tools and solutions in your lab you're currently using, like what kind of software you already have in place, what kind of instruments you're working with, how can they integrate, or what am I planning to integrate? Do I need additional hardware, accessories, connectors for getting my instruments connected, new equipment? Also, when you're thinking about purchasing new equipment, consider also the data capturing. What are actually also your processes in the lab you're also striving to optimize, right? Also, it's worth it to check the infrastructure. How is your lab set up? Where are your freezers located? How is your cell biology lab, for example, set up in a way? It's not also how the lab is set up in a way with what kind of instruments are placed where, but also is there maybe the room infrastructure set up in the way that, for example, I can utilize certain software in the market. And it's also worth it to talk to the lab users. What are the things they would like to consider optimizing, bringing more convenience in? And of course, thinking about what kind of support I can get from manufacturers like Eppendorf. Where can they help me or guide me through my journey switching to a digital lab? And when it comes to digitalization, we can for sure say, we are living right now in this change of habits and adaptations of processes as we need to during this pandemic, the worldwide pandemic. We have to set up new ways of learning, for example, for the school kids. This is the same process when you're embracing a change with digitalization in the laboratory. You can start with different building blocks. You can maybe also start in parallel that you're still documenting analog, but also for certain things going digital. You could combine things and start step by step. I think it's worth it to start with the sample, thinking about the sample inventory, for example, how you manage that. And the most important thing is also show the advantages to the team where you are planning to bring a change, where you would like to introduce digital solutions, because a change is never introduced by one person. I think everyone needs to see what kind of advantages they will bring, what is in for me as a person. And it's also important to evaluate the implementation. What worked good, what didn't work well, and what needs to be readjusted, so that you really can bring and lift the change within the entire team and make the most of that change. And by that, we can talk about now, it's the last slide of our presentation, what are actually the gains of the digital world. I think when we were talking about the 3 goals, reducing the risk, reducing costs, and also saving time, we can say for sure that introducing digital solutions can help you to optimize your processes. It can help you also to keep an eye on your service schedule, also service costs when thinking about like the remote updates. No service technician needs to be on site. It's also saving time on your end, but also giving you access maybe to future features when it comes to certain device groups. Especially the need for remote working and collaboration will be enhanced. We see this nowadays. I mean, we are not at the trade show right now. We are talking in a digital way. You're participating in a digital manner with that conference. And this is a great way digitalization brings us a benefit. And also the documentation can be enhanced with digitalization. And it also delivers us greater reproducibility. When it comes to data can be secured in a much better way. And also we have a better insight into processes when it comes to digitalization. So in general, these would be the gains from the digital world. And this would be our live webinar. And please feel free to drop questions if you have. If you would like to learn more about the digital lab solutions we have at Eppendorf, feel free to visit the website. I just posted the chat function. It's worth it to have a look into that. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in today.
Thanks from my side as well. I mean, what we now learned is really digitalization is not just classic on-off, but it's a process to move from the analog world we are all used to the digital world stepwise, not in just one rush. I think that's really the core message. It's nothing where say, oh gosh, that's far too much work, but it's really something which you can do step by step, month by month to optimize your conditions locally.
Well, thank you very much, Jan and Anne-Claire. Thank you for your presentation. I don't see any questions. So in the meantime, I would like to thank all the viewers for watching as well. And we will continue tomorrow with the last day of this online week. So if you haven't registered yet for the other 3 webinars, you can still do so. And I will share a link where you can register. All these webinars are recorded as well. So if you like to watch something again or share it with a colleague, you can do so. And we will send an email out on Thursday by the end of the week. So you can watch the replays and have a look at the slides again if you like. And let me double check if there's any questions. No questions. So well, then we're just gonna close the broadcast here. The chat will still be available. And then thank you again very much, Anne-Claire and Jan. And we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.